So with that, our topic for today is the new beta viewer for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. And I'll be tag teaming this talk today with Louise, the other half of our Blueprint user support team here in Raleigh. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and hand things over to Louise to get us started with a little background.
All right, thanks, Hilary. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. And all right, I can't see anybody's face anymore, but I'm gonna assume that you guys can see my screen.
Yeah,
Welcome to our Third Thursday web forum, where we're going to be talking about the beta viewer for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. So just to give you a sense of what to expect, today we're going to get started with a quick overview of the Southeast Conservation Blueprint, just to familiarize ourselves with what we're really trying to do with it. And next, Hilary's going to walk you through our beta viewer for the blueprint, and she's going to give you an overview of what this viewer is capable of doing right now and where we're going to push it in the future, and kind of how we're going to get there, how we're going to make choices about what additional functions and features that we would really like to add to that. As user support staff, we always like to work really closely with the people who find value in the blueprint, and to make sure that when we're communicating it and we're providing tools to access it, that we're really working closely with people so that we know that we're actually providing ways that people can make more sense of the blueprint, that they can get a little bit more out of it. So we'll talk a little bit about where we're going to go from there. And next, we're going to wrap up with an interactive exercise where we're going to ask you specifically what you would like to see from a Southeast Blueprint viewer. So basically, what we'd like for you to keep in mind as you look at the beta viewer that Hilary will show you is think about your reactions to it, think about the features that Hilary is going to show you, and think about, hey, maybe how you'd like to tweak them, and maybe some additional features that you'd like to see added in the future. And so with that, I just kind of wanted, again, for us to get back to the Southeast Conservation Blueprint and what it is. It's a living spatial plan that identifies important areas for conservation across the Southeast and Caribbean. It is the primary product of the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, or CCAS, and its intent is to serve as our plan, our literal blueprint to achieve the CCAS vision, which is a connected network of lands and waters that supports thriving fish and wildlife populations and an improved quality of life for people. So CCAS was originally initiated by the states of the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and the Federal Southeast Natural Resource Leaders Group. And as a state-led initiative, it brings together diverse partners to achieve a common goal, which is a 10% or greater improvement in the health, function, and connectivity of southeastern ecosystems by 2060. But since its beginnings, CCAS really has evolved into this really diverse partnership that includes a broad network across multiple sectors like federal and state agencies, private companies, universities, and land trusts. And this is what's really making this a true collaborative forum for people and organizations across the Southeast to come together and plan how to achieve the CCAS vision and goal while respecting individual organizations, authorities, missions, and roles. So again, the Southeast Blueprint is our strategy to achieve both the vision and the goal, and it identifies important places for conservation and restoration. And so what I'm showing you right here, areas that are showing up as that darker blue, these are the areas of high conservation value, and these are the places that are the most important for ecosystem health, function, and connectivity. Areas that are showing up in the lighter blue, these are medium conservation value areas. And these are places that they might require a little bit extra work, maybe some restoration, but they're still really important, especially when we take into context buffering high value areas and thinking about connectivity. So far, more than 225 people from at least 100 different organizations have used the blueprint to bring in over $31 million of conservation investment to help protect and restore almost 70,000 acres. And this is just what we've been able to report. These are just the numbers that we know of. Hilary and I, as user support staff, we really try to track where the blueprint has been involved in conservation decisions, whether that's bringing in extra resources or going or supporting on-the-ground conservation actions. Some examples of the way the blueprint has been used, nonprofits like the Nature Conservancy and even smaller local land trusts have used the blueprint to help inform their land protection. 6 cities in the panhandle of Florida are using the blueprint to identify important habitat corridors to show linkages between their natural resource assets as part of an effort to improve resilience and their recreation for the region. And then again, in those examples that I just shared with you, we have got staff that are working directly with the users because the blueprint also comes with help. It comes with this free service, what we call user support. And that's people across this entire region, not just here in North Carolina, but across the entire region, people like Hilary and myself that are here to help people use the blueprint. And what that means is that we do things like we make maps, we write language for people to help boost their grant proposals. We participate in partnerships to help people think through and strategize the best way to use the blueprint for whatever they're thinking of. And really what we like to do is build relationships with people, with organizations, with these other partnerships so that we can help them. And one of the things that we're getting out of this relationship is that we're better able to understand what they need from the blueprint so we can help inform blueprint improvements over time, and also how they're accessing the blueprint, how they're able to explore this. And we'll touch on this a little bit later on in the presentation about exactly what I mean by that. So when you're thinking about using the blueprint, there's a couple of things that we like for people to keep in mind. And one is that while the blueprint does identify important areas for shared conservation action, we're actually not prescribing any actions themselves. Also, the blueprint, we're always trying to take advantage of the best available science, partner information, revisions, errors that we're able to catch, and it is revised on an annual cycle. And also, we like to say that this is not the end-all, be-all plan. It's not a one-stop shop. It's meant to be used in combination with different kinds of local data like natural heritage or state data. It's not that one-stop shop, but it's a great place to get started, and it's meant to be used in complement with other local data sources. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about the origin story of the Southeast Blueprint. And back when we had an active network of landscape conservation cooperatives, or LCCs, these were really the organizations that were developing these large regional conservation plans. And each LCC went about developing these plans a little bit differently. And they were really looking within their own cooperatives and within the context of their own regions to create their plans. And those plans, and you can kind of see the geography here. We've got how these LCCs kind of fell out and where they were occurring. And so this is kind of where we started with the inputs coming from these LCCs to start informing the Southeast Blueprint. And this is where we're at today. So the LCC planning products were those original inputs. And because some of these LCC plans, they were not being maintained, we've actually started pulling from some additional sources, like in the state of Texas here, we're drawing on the Texas Crucial Habitat Assessment Tool, or the CHAT. And really what I'm showing you here, this is the input map. And we've got about 10 different inputs, and each color is representing a different input or plan. And these areas where there's hatching right here, this is where plans overlap, and these are kind of integration zones. You can think of them that way. These are overlap zones. And these are all the different plans that are driving the Southeast Blueprint. So from this, it is derived from this input. And it makes sense because you can see that there's a little bit of differences, especially if you kind of know where the boundaries fall out. You can see why things look a little bit differently. But when we talk about the blueprint being, I always compare it to, it's like a quilt. And this is the end product, and these are each one of the pieces of the quilt. So for user support staff, Hilary and I spend a lot of time helping people understand why the blueprint is identifying areas as important. And as I just showed you, a lot of that reason of why areas are being shown as important is because it's drawing from these multiple plans. And while we're always here to help people, we are always here to help answer that question why, to dig a little bit deeper, to build relationships. We're in it for the long haul for sure. We also want to provide tools that allow people to explore the blueprint and find out a little bit more. So in 2019, we presented an early version of a beta viewer for the Southeast Blueprint at the Seattle conference. And this online tool is really meant to be an easy, intuitive way to communicate the values occurring within the Southeast Blueprint and to understand what is driving them. It's a way to help summarize all of these plans. And the main purpose is to answer the question, why are these areas considered having conservation value? And also to help people understand, does it match my own priorities? Is this something that's for me? And also by launching a beta viewer, it really presents a great opportunity for us to work with people to see how they would like to play around with the blueprint. So again, there's a challenge where there's a lot of the underlying data that they're just different plans. And so we're really interested in better ways to communicate the values of those plans, like what's driving the blueprint. And for example, we're offering this beta viewer as a tool, and we're asking people to kind of review the functionalities and the features included in it. Because, for example, if you think about Google Maps, in Google Maps, you are not just given a map and being told, go find your way around, go get coffee or whatever. You're actually given a feature that allows you within Google Maps to identify where you are on the landscape, to see what's around you and where you might want to go. And we're kind of interested, when I talk about features and functionalities within a beta viewer, that's what we're really kind of getting at. And so with that, I'm actually going to stop presenting right now, however that may be. Get back to my teams.
Are you guys seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that intro. And really brief point of clarification, I think it was the 2020 Seattle conference where we first presented the beta viewer, but time has no meaning now in pandemic life. So I think it was just October that this past October that we first presented this tool. So yeah, let's dive into a live demo of the Southeast Blueprint beta viewer. When you, I'm just using this test URL. This is just on a test server right now. When it's publicly available, we'll have this clearly linked from the Blueprint webpage, so it's easy to find. But I'm just using this handy dandy link and going directly to it right now. So when you load the Southeast Blueprint beta viewer, you're going to land on this zoomed out map that shows the blueprint, and there's this informational sidebar on the left. It'll give you some helpful background information on the Southeast Blueprint with links to more information. It'll define the blueprint categories for you and just provide a little bit more information than you get in this basic legend. There's some instructions on how to use the viewer that you can refer back to if you get stuck, or if you're the type of person who does like to read the directions first, which I know not everyone is. And then at the bottom, there is a citation for how we recommend referencing this data if you end up using something that you learned in the viewer in something like a grant proposal or a report. And then we have some other handy dandy tabs here on the left. This one is Find Location. And so if there's a particular area that I'm interested in, say Congaree National Park, I can search for that. And if it comes up in the search results, most common destinations are going to be georeferenced and come up in your search result. I can click on that and it's going to zoom me right into that area that I'm interested in and drop a pin. I can just X out to get rid of my Find Location, and I'm zooming back out with the scroll wheel on my mouse here. This other tab is Contact, and this is just to direct you who to reach out to if you either find something with the blueprint priorities that you want to give feedback on. As Louise mentioned, that's a really important part of how we improve and refine the blueprint over time. So if you see an area that's high priority or high value and you think it should be lower, or vice versa, maybe you see an area that is really important but it's not captured in the blueprint, that's the type of feedback that we love to get. And so all this is doing is pointing you to the contact page of the CCAS website, where we have a point person for each state in the CCAS geography. And of course, if you're just on this webinar and you want to reach out to me or Louise, that's absolutely fine too. And if we're not the best person to talk to, we'll put you in touch with whoever is. And then we also offer, again, this user support service that Louise mentioned. So if you get stuck, you want clarification, help understanding how the blueprint works, or you just want to work with somebody one-on-one so that you have more confidence that you're using the blueprint and interpreting it the right way, we're here to help. And everything from brainstorming to making maps to writing reports, we're here to help you use the blueprint in any way to inform your work and bring in new resources. So that's your basic info tab. Let me give you a little tour of the main map. You'll see in the upper right, we have our zoom in and zoom out buttons. That's pretty straightforward. If you ever get confused about what a button does, if you mouse over it, it will typically tell you. So that's to reset your bearing to the north if you get a little bit wonky. Bottom right is your legend, and I can click to minimize it if it's in my way. In the bottom left, we have this little button that allows you to change the base map. Your options are this basic gray, or you can turn on the imagery. And this is typically more helpful if you're zoomed in at a really local scale and you're looking to find your way around and find a landmark and get oriented. So for now, I'll turn our gray back on. So that's your basic map features. And you may have noticed this orange menu at the top, this message that's telling me I need to zoom in to select an area. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to zoom in using the scroll wheel on my mouse, and I'm just going to, for the purposes of this demonstration, choose this part of Tennessee, which is going to be in the Appalachian Naturescape geography. If you think back to that inputs map that Louise showed a couple of minutes ago, this is the Appalachian Naturescape quilt square of the big quilt that the Southeast Blueprint is. And so you see that these boundaries have appeared on my map, and these represent the edges of Huck 12 subwatersheds. And as I move my mouse around, I have this little shadow that's following me around and telling me that I can select. So I'm going to just choose at random a nice watershed that I want to learn more about, and I'm just going to click to select it. And now you see that the priorities, the tabs have changed, and now I'm looking at this priorities tab that's telling me specifically what I'm seeing in this watershed. So this high-level pie chart is just telling me the breakdown of the blueprint priorities that occur in this watershed. 36% of this Huck 12 is considered high value, 38% is considered medium, and then the remaining 26% are not prioritized in the blueprint. It's just reminding me what these classes mean. And then as I scroll down, here we get to the part that this beta viewer is really trying to help with, and that's show you where these blue priorities on the map are coming from. What data set is this based on? And it's telling us that the blueprint priorities in this Huck 12 are based on priorities from the Appalachian Naturescape Design, as well as the Nature Conservancy's Resilient and Connected Landscapes Project, specifically the prioritized network layer. And so this pie chart is just giving me a little bit more information about where these high-level blueprint priorities are coming from. And you may notice that the green priorities, these classes here, are going to correspond to the dark blue high conservation value classes. And anything in purple is going to correspond to our lighter blue medium conservation value class. So this is just telling you how the categories from the underlying plan are scoring. There's always going to be a little bit of information about what this plan is, how it was developed, and links to learn more about it or go elsewhere to access the source data if you want to dig into it directly. And then you can see this mention of the blueprint integration documentation. If you really are a detail-oriented person and you want to get into the nitty-gritty of how did you stitch this Appalachian Naturescape layer together with its neighbors to create the blueprint, all of that information is available for you here. So I started here in the Appalachians because it's a good example of kind of the minimum thing that the blueprint can do for you, regardless of where you are in the Southeast. We want anywhere in the CCAS geography that you click for you to be able to at least get one level below the blue map and see where these priorities are coming from. In some subregions of the Southeast, we also have indicator data available for you, and that's going even one level deeper than the input plan and saying, okay, what's it a priority for? What are the underlying indicators? Is it important for imperiled aquatic species, or is it important for large intact habitat cores, or where are these priorities coming from? And unfortunately, we don't have that available in the Appalachians yet, but I will show you examples of a couple of subregions where you can get to the indicator data. We also have a threats tab, and this is going to chart either urbanization or sea level rise or both, whichever threats are relevant to your area. And of course, here in Tennessee, we're not too worried about sea level rise, thankfully. So this map of urban growth is just telling us what percent of the HUC 12 we expect to be urban at different decades out to 2100. So in 2020, this watershed is projected to be 4.9% urban, all the way up to 25% urban by the year 2100. And this is telling us where this data is coming from the Sleuth Urban Growth Model. And of course, there are links to learn more if you want to dig into the source data. And then our last tab here is the Partners tab. And this is going to tell us a little bit about who owns the conserved lands in this subwatershed and what the protection status is of those conserved lands. And we've actually already gotten some feedback that these headers are a little bit confusing, and that's just speaking to the fact that, again, this is a beta viewer. So we will be changing this wording. It's a little confusing to be seeing marine coming up in Tennessee, but this is just telling you conserved areas, which depending on where you click, they could be terrestrial or they could be marine. So we can see that the vast majority of this watershed is not conserved, and that less than 1% that is managed for biodiversity. Here at the bottom, we have these quick links to land trust by county. So all this is doing is showing you the counties that overlap this HUC 12 subwatershed, and then I can click this link to get to a page maintained by the Land Trust Alliance of land trusts that are known to be working within that county. And this is kind of more of a prototype of a feature that would allow you to see other partners that you could connect with in this subwatershed. So if I go back to the viewer, if you really like the information that you're getting and you maybe want to see a PDF of this information that would be easy to copy and paste from, maybe for your grant or for your report, you can just click Create Summary Report and it'll create that for you. And it's usually pretty fast. And so all this is going to do is download a PDF. And depending on where you are in the Southeast, is going to depend on how comprehensive and how much information there is in this report. What you're seeing in the Appalachians, because we don't have indicators in this area, it's not going to be as thorough as some, but it's still a pretty powerful analysis tool that's going to simplify and automate a lot of the work that you used to have to do in GIS by hand. So in this report, you're going to get some introductory information about the blueprint. You're going to get maps of the blueprint priorities and the underlying tables of analysis showing how much of the blueprint is in your area. And then you're going to see maps of the underlying input plan. In this case, again, that's Appalachian Naturescape, and analysis for that, as well as analysis and maps for your threat data and for the data sets on protected status and conservation lands ownership that you saw in the Partners tab. And if we had indicators for the Appalachian, and I will show you an example of an area that does, those would be in your report too, individual maps of each indicator layer and how those indicators score. So I'll go ahead and close out of that. Now, if at any point I'm cruising around a HUC and I get confused and I want to go back to the info tab at the beginning, I can totally do that and just X out, and then there's my informational sidebar waiting for me to use these other tabs, and then I can just reselect to learn more. So that's our example HUC and the Appalachians. I'm going to zoom out and we're going to go to a different area and we're going to check out the priorities in Texas. And the reason that I wanted to look at Texas is just to immediately highlight the difference in spatial scale that you're seeing from where we just were in the apps to where we are now. And that's because the underlying scale of the crucial habitat assessment tool, where the priorities are coming from in Texas, it's a little bit of a coarser plan. And so there is this difference that you're seeing. It's a little bit of an artifact of the underlying spatial data. But just like we did in the apps, I can click on this HUC and it's going to tell me the blueprint priorities, and it's going to tell me the underlying data that's driving those priorities in this area, in this case, the crucial habitat assessment tool, where these categories in green, again, link up to high conservation value. The categories in purple link up to medium, and so you can see where that's coming from. Otherwise, the data that you would see in this HUC is pretty much the same as what we just looked at. So let's look over at an area where you can see some different information. I'm going to take us to the Gulf Coast of Florida. And we're going to go check out around the Panama City area and click on a HUC here. Let's just choose this one for the sake of demonstration. What we're going to look at here is how it works when you're in an overlap zone between two different blueprint inputs. And if you think back to Louise's blueprint inputs map, those were areas that were shown with hatching over top of them. So this is HUC 12, where we have two blueprint inputs that are being used to drive the blueprint priorities. The first is the Florida Conservation Blueprint, and you're seeing how those priorities break down here. And the second is the Middle Southeast Conservation Blueprint. And so both of these plans are driving the priorities in this area. And you can get a write-up on how they were developed, again, links to access more data. The other cool thing that I'm going to show you in this HUC is this is an area where we do have underlying indicator data available in the viewer. So you're going to be able to learn a little bit more and go that one level deeper beyond just the input plan. So if I click the indicators tab, you can see that I have two options I can toggle between. I can look at the Florida indicators, which are listed here, or I can look at the Middle Southeast. And unfortunately, the Middle Southeast is another example where, because this is just a beta viewer, we don't have all of the indicators in here yet. So if I go back to Florida, you can see that it's summarizing the indicators that occur in the Florida Conservation Blueprint. They're sorted by terrestrial, freshwater, marine, and then there's this other or multi-ecosystem category. And what this display of the indicators is trying to do, we've already gotten some feedback that we're displaying this in a pretty confusing way. And so I want to highlight this as something that we're definitely working to improve so that this is a little bit easier to understand and interpret. But for now, so you understand what it's presenting to you today in its current form, essentially this little average bubble represents the average score in this subwatershed on that indicator, because within a given subwatershed, there's going to be a range of scores that an indicator might receive. And so this is just trying to distill that into one data point. Let's look at the average score for that indicator in the subwatershed. And so anything where the average little bubble is far to the right is kind of suggesting that's an indicator that scores highly in the subwatershed. Maybe that's deriving the blueprint priorities. So in any one of these, you can see as I move my mouse, it prompts me to click for more details. And so we can pick one that we think looks interesting that we'd want to learn more about. How about the CLIP version 4 landscape resource priority? If I click on that, it's going to tell me more information about this indicator in this little write-up, and it's going to really break down what % of the watershed is scoring in each class of the indicator. So we see that the vast majority of this watershed, 85%, is scoring in priority 2 on this indicator. And if I really want to look at that indicator data set in isolation, I can always click this link to go to the Conservation Planning Atlas and visualize that data on its own. So that's always available to you. So that's kind of a crash course in the indicator tab. The other cool thing that we can see in this watershed that we haven't been able to see before is sea level rise, because here we are on the coast. So if I go to the threats tab, I can look at not just the % of the watershed projected to be impacted by urban growth, but also the extent of the watershed that's predicted to be inundated at high tide due to sea level rise under different sea level rise scenarios. So we can see sea level rise, unsurprisingly, as an increasing threat for this coastal HUC, where 4.7% is predicted to be inundated at high tide without sea level rise, all the way up to 21% of the HUC predicted to be inundated due to sea level rise once we're in a 6 feet of sea level rise scenario. And this is telling us that this data comes from NOAA's sea level rise inundation data set. So that's a few interesting things about this HUC, where we have this overlap zone between the Florida Conservation Blueprint and Middle Southeast. And I'm assuming that, is this all crystal clear to you and you're completely following everything I'm saying and it's the most intuitive thing you've ever heard? I'm guessing no. I would be shocked if anybody is thinking that, wow, this is so simple and easy to understand. We know that there's a lot of complexity under the hood of the blueprint. The beta viewer is intended to make it a little bit easier to understand those things. We know we have a long way to go in really presenting this information in an optimal way. And so I do want to just reiterate that, hey, we know that this isn't perfect. The underlying data sets are complex. And if you find this a little bit overwhelming, you can always reach out to me or Louise, and that's what user support is for. I also wanted to preview that all of those overlap zones being one of the reasons this is so confusing, this is a problem that we're really going to make major strides on in 2022 when we're doing a major revision of our approach for the Southeast Blueprint. And we'll be actually using just one consistent blueprint input for 12 states of the 15-state CCAS region. And that's going to really simplify and streamline the input data sets that you're seeing here, as well as the indicators that are being used to develop those input data sets, because we're going to have a consistent suite of indicators that's covering the vast majority of the CCAS geography. So if you're thinking, hey, this is a little bit much, this crazy quilt is a little bit intimidating, we are going to be really, really simplifying and streamlining things in 2022. So I did just want to give a brief plug for that new approach and that big revision that's coming just next year. Now, in case we have any marine folks on the phone who are bored of me rambling on about terrestrial this and terrestrial that, I did want to show what this looks like in the marine environment, because we do have marine priorities around Florida and off the coast of the South Atlantic. So if I zoom in the marine environment, you'll immediately notice that we have a very different selection unit here, and hopefully that's not surprising since we don't have watersheds in the marine. These here are outer continental shelf lease blocks, and I can click on any one of these, just like a watershed that I want to learn more about. Here, the priorities are coming from the South Atlantic Conservation Blueprint, and we do have marine indicators here. Marine birds, marine mammals, and potential hard bottom condition. And so again, I can click on any one of these indicators to learn more about them and see a more detailed breakdown of how that indicator is scoring. So we have about 16% of this lease block that scores between the 60th and 80th percentile of importance for marine birds on this indicator. So that's what the marine looks like. I'm going to choose just one more huck to look at for you all today, another one that's in an integration zone. We're going to go to Southern Virginia and choose someplace that looks good. So I'll just go ahead and select this huck. Sorry, I misclicked here. So if I go back to the priorities tab, again, I can see the blueprint chart and the chart of the inputs that are driving the blueprint in this area. And here is an integration zone between the North Atlantic Natures Network Plan and the South Atlantic Conservation Blueprint. The indicators tab here is going to show indicators for both, because we have indicators for both of these plans available in the viewer. And so if I were to click Create Summary Report here, I would get a much longer, more detailed report than what you saw for the Appalachians, because it's going to have a map and a table for every single one of these indicators that occurs in the watershed. So you can get a more detailed sense of what's driving priority in this area. Okay, it's high value, it's blue, but blue for what? And is it my kind of blue, the blue that aligns with my mission and my interests as an organization? The indicators are really designed to help you answer that question. So let me look at my notes and make sure that I've covered everything that I wanted to here. I believe I have. So this is pretty much the main things that you can do in the main body of the viewer and the map here. The last thing that I want to mention that you can do now is make a custom report. And this is by far the coolest thing. I've kind of saved the best for last here. So we've been looking at subwatersheds, and not everybody thinks at a subwatershed level. Not everyone is doing conservation at a subwatershed scale. What if you're looking to strengthen a proposal for a land acquisition project and you really need to know how the blueprint scores within your particular parcel? Well, Blueprint User Support has always been able to help you with that, but now you are more empowered to do that on your own with a custom blueprint report. All you have to do is upload a zipped up shape file for your area, and it will make you a report showing the blueprint, all the underlying indicators, the threats data, everything that I've shown you. So I'm going to just demonstrate that really quickly today. And I've just used a shape file from the Protected Lands database for the sake of demonstration today. So here I'm going to enter the name of my area that I want to appear in my report. And all I have to do is add a shape file. So I'm going to go to my recents here where I have this shape file, Great Dismal Swamp National Wildlife Refuge.zip. You can also open it this way and just drag if you just want to drag your file over here. So there's some optional information that you're able to fill out if you want to, and this just gives us the opportunity to follow up with you and understand how you use the blueprint if you have any feedback, but this is not required. It's just super helpful to us if you have the time. And then I'm going to click Create Report. Now, because this is on a test server, it's running a little bit more slowly than it will when it's publicly available. So I'm going to employ that time-honored strategy of cooking show hosts and pull my report right out of the oven that's already ready while that runs in the background. Now, this is an example of a report because it's in the overlap zone between the South Atlantic and Natures Network. That's going to be really long and comprehensive because it has all of those indicators in there. We've got 61 pages of good stuff to play with. So just like the summary report, you've got your introductory blueprint information, your map of the blueprint priorities, tables of how the blueprint is scoring, and then maps and analysis for the underlying data from each of the blueprint inputs. So 94% of this area that I've uploaded is covered by the South Atlantic blueprint. And here we can see the mapped priorities, the table of priorities, and then this great table that shows which indicators within the South Atlantic Blueprint occur in this area. And I can use this to navigate to the indicators that are most interesting to me. So let's say, for example, I'm really interested in the herpetological diversity of Great Dismal Swamp. Well, I can check out the amphibian and reptile areas indicator, and it's going to tell me that this is a priority amphibian and reptile conservation area, and maybe that would help add some additional ammunition to my grant proposal. So as I scroll down, you'll see all of these other indicators that are available in the South Atlantic, and the exact same thing is true for Nature's Network. And I can just go back to the table of contents to quickly navigate here. 76% of the Great Dismal Swamp National Wildlife Refuge is covered by North Atlantic Nature's Network. And then I can see maps of the underlying data here too. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with your threat maps. Again, not worried about sea level rise here, but here's a look at urban growth. And then the ownership and partners information that you would see in the partners tab of the viewer, just being able to see maps of each individual data layer. So that's what a custom report looks like. And again, it's not intended to take the place of user support, but if you're the type of person who likes to work independently, this is here for you. And it's also, frankly, a huge help to us as user support staff because it's automating a lot of what we used to do by hand. So that pretty much wraps up. This is what it looks like when you download a report. This has been running in the background. It's just going to stick it right in your downloads folder. I can click this menu bar at the top to get back to the main simple viewer. And that's pretty much what the beta viewer of the Southeast viewer can do right now. I do want to preview, as Louise said, a feature that we're looking to add to this into the future. And to do that, I'm going to take us over to the South Atlantic Simple Viewer. And you'll see it does look a little bit similar, and that's because the Southeast Beta Viewer was modeled in part after the South Atlantic Simple Viewer. This is just a standalone viewer for one input to the Southeast Blueprint, the South Atlantic Blueprint. And so everything here is a little bit simpler because we're just dealing with one input with one consistent set of underlying indicators. The main thing that I want to draw your attention to here is as I zoom into the map, you see I'm not seeing those squiggly lines of the watershed boundaries. And that's because we have a mode in the simple viewer called pixel mode. So I can toggle over to summary data and you'll see something that looks a lot more familiar to what we just saw at the Southeast level. But if I stick with pixel data, this allows me to actually click on an individual pixel within the blueprint, and that's really the smallest unit that's available to look at the blueprint priorities, and it's going to tell me about that pixel specifically. So it's telling me the blueprint priority. It's also showing me information on hubs and corridors and this pixel's importance for connectivity. That's something that we're looking to add to the Southeast Blueprint Beta Viewer as well. We do have hubs and corridors. I think we call them hubs and connectors in the Southeast Blueprint, but that's an underlying data set that we're looking to add into the Southeast viewer that you do have here in the South Atlantic. So that's a feature we'll be adding as well. But the main thing here is if you go over to the indicators tab, you're seeing a very, very different presentation of the indicators here than you saw with that average bubble that can be kind of confusing when you're in summary mode. And that's because for this one individual pixel, there's only one individual indicator score, and we can tell you precisely how that indicator is scoring. And so any of these where the score looks particularly high, we might click on that to learn more. Looks like we're in a medium intact habitat core. Let's click on that. And it's going to tell me more about intact habitat cores. Again, link me to that specific indicator data set if I want to see it. So this is a direction that we're hoping to take the Southeast viewer very soon, adding this pixel data option and adding the hubs and corridors information here. So I just wanted to preview that as one of the future directions that we'll be taking the Southeast beta viewer, hopefully very soon. And I think that is it. So Louise, I believe I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to you to talk a little bit more about next steps. And if you caught anything that I forgot, please feel free to speak up.
Thanks, Hilary. Can you see my screen? Is it showing?
Not yet. I just stopped sharing.
Yeah. All right. How about now?
Beautiful.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much, Hilary, for showing all that functionality within the viewers. And so by now, I think everybody can see there's a lot there. There's a lot of information. And with a lot of information, it's really fun, but also it can be a little bit of a challenge on the best ways to present that. And so again, as we're trying to emphasize, this is a beta viewer, meaning that we still have a lot of testing and improvements to go. And we're really, really looking forward to working with people directly to make sure that we're making improvements, adding new additional features that people actually want. So it's not really about what we'd like to see, it's really about more of what you would like to see. And so in about the next month or two, we'll hopefully be able to release the beta viewer. We still got a little bit of work to do. I can't give a hard deadline on that release, but it will be made publicly available. And what we'd like to do is to work with people to explore it, find out what's working well, and look for areas where we can make some tweaks, or we could add some additional things to make it a little bit better. And so what I'd like to do now is, number one, pause for any questions that we might have, but also I'd like for you to use your phone or your computer and go to slido.com. We're doing a little bit of an interactive exercise. So once you're on slido.com, you just enter in your participant code here, which is 29436. And for anybody who's not seeing it up here, we can add it. We could add it in the chat as well. And while everybody's kind of logging on, we're just going to be, this is what you're going to see. So once you're on, you're going to be kind of in Q&A mode, and you can just ask a question. And if you'll see kind of one that I've already prompted in there, which is, hey, I'd like to be able to turn priorities on and off. And really, we just would like to know, again, keep in mind that when you were seeing the beta viewer that Hilary was showing you, we were asking, like, what's your reaction to that? Were you like, oh, that's great, or I really like that feature, or I'm super excited about a report and I wish that report also showed something else? We'd love to get your feedback while we had you on the line here, so you can type in a question or a comment or something you'd like to see. Also, if you see, and you can do it anonymously, also, if you see that somebody was like, ooh, yeah, I really like this idea of being able to turn on and off priorities, that's really cool, you can like that, and that will kind of help us understand where the demand is at for that. And so while we're all kind of getting set up right here, I'm also going to open it up to any questions people might have.
Would you also back up a slide so I can grab the code again? I was about to stick it in the chat and then I lost confidence I'd gotten the number right. Okay, 29436. All right, I stuck that in the chat for everybody. Thank you. Yeah, any questions?
And I will say, so if people are kind of getting into Slido and seeing some things, so the question that we kind of prompted with, like, I'd like to be able to turn priorities on and off. So Hilary and I have actually already done a round of testing with about 5 or 6 people. And one of the things that people had mentioned, that a couple of our users had mentioned when we were kind of doing this rough testing is, oh, it would be nice to kind of turn on and off priorities potentially, but also kind of see how indicators kind of fall out within the blueprint themselves to be able to see that. So if that's something that's of interest to people, let us know through the Slido, and also let us know if Slido's not working out for you. And feel free to also enter things into the chat.
We've got a question in the Slido. Will the beta viewer apply to the South Atlantic map or just the Southeast map? It's definitely going to be the whole Southeast map. The beta viewer is for the Southeast blueprint specifically, and then that South Atlantic viewer that I showed you is a viewer just for one input, and I only showed that because it did have that pixel mode feature that I wanted to demonstrate. So once we make the Southeast blueprint beta viewer publicly available, yes, you will be able to see the whole Southeast blueprint blue map.
And we've had the simple viewer for the South Atlantic input for a while. That's a tool we recognized really quickly early on that we needed to have a way for people to explore and learn more about the blueprint. And with the Southeast blueprint, as it has become a more mature product, we wanted to expand that South Atlantic version a little bit larger. But because we're dealing with kind of different kind of fun opportunities with different plans and how to show that data a little bit differently, we're calling this beta because we realize there's just a little bit of extra work that we need to do. But we're hoping that it can grow into what Hilary showed you with the simple viewer or the South Atlantic viewer.
We have another question in the Slido of reports are great. Are they all PDF? It might be nice to have tabular data that can be easily grabbed and incorporated in external tables. That's a great suggestion. Yes, all of the reports currently are PDF. That was by far the easiest thing to automate on the software side, but I'm assuming by tabular data, you're thinking of something like an Excel spreadsheet or a .csv. Feel free to amend the record on that if that's not what you were thinking of, but that's great feedback. Mm-hmm. I hear that might be useful.
And I also see, do you need GIS on your computer to use the new, I'm guessing the new Southeast Blueprint viewer? Will it be like the simple viewer? So no, you don't need GIS on your computer to be able to explore the Southeast Blueprint through that beta viewer. It will be like the simple viewer.
Yeah, all you need is an internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
These are great questions, folks. Keep them coming. Suggestions too. Someone says, I didn't catch whether sea level rise can be adjusted in the viewer. I don't know about adjusted. It's just showing you the projected extent of inundation due to sea level rise at a variety of scenarios from current day to up to 6 feet of sea level rise. So it'll give you the extent of inundation in each of those scenarios, but it's not really adjustable. Mm-hmm. There's another question of whether it will reflect USGS's PAD 2.0 and show conservation easements. So basically the protected areas data that's in the partners tab that's driving both the conserved lands ownership and the degree of protection status. That's actually coming from PAD 2.1, which I think was maybe last September that was released. So a little bit of an improvement in a more recent version than PAD 2.0, and easements are included in that. So you won't see those on the map per se, but the information on protected lands will be included.
Actually, Hilary, will you pull up the Southeast Blueprint viewer again? I'm going to stop sharing. I think that might be nice to see because I'm kind of curious. This would be a fun question to ask all of you while we've got you on the line, holding you, I don't want to say holding you captive, but here you are with us. And if you zoom in, go ahead and zoom into any kind of random HUC and let's look. I'm kind of curious about this question about the Partners tab. And so if you're thinking about showing conservation easements, like right now when we looked at it, you can see conserved lands, marine, you can see the conserved lands ownership up there, and then you can see the protection status. Is this where do you think it would be valuable? I'm curious for everybody here, do you think it would be valuable to see that protection status? Is that something that people are really interested in seeing? Is that helpful?
If that was your question, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, this is Brian Fainer with the Park Service. I think that was my question. Yeah, I was going to type in this other question, but you know, with 30 by 30, the coding for the protected status, you know, for PAD US, I think that will play a bigger role. So understanding the, you know, being able to differentiate between, you know, obviously multiple use and protected areas that, you know, status 1 and 2 is important. You know, being able to differentiate for a Forest Service, you know, regular forest land versus a wilderness area, that's important. But then also for potential future coding of easements and things like that. I don't know. It's just a big area. Uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty around it. But with a lot of the agencies and folks thinking about 30 by 30 and the quantitative metrics around that, I think having the status codes will be more important.
Okay. Thank you.
It's great to hear that there's a demand for that information that we're showing in the Partners tab. You will also see the layers in a report if you generate a report. So I wanted to show that you can see who owns conserved lands within that area. And this would be the same if you'd uploaded a custom shapefile with a custom to generate a custom report, and same with the land protection status. So we're trying to make that available through the Partners tab and through the reporting.
But that's really helpful. That kind of feedback that yes, you do want to see that is great. There are times that we question that, and if that protection status is something that people really wanted to keep in there. So this is kind of feedback that's really good to hear. Again, we really want to design this tool based on what people want to be there instead of what we think is the best, because we're inherently biased and we just know too much about the tool and we have preferences that, but it's really important that to make sure that we're keeping things in that people want to see. And Hilary, I also see somebody said about are the individual layers incorporated in the priorities available for download from the tool or elsewhere? And the answer is yes. By going to the indicators tab, you can kind of click in this area where we don't have the indicators lined up yet, but in other areas where you can see the individual indicators, you ought to be able to click underneath and go to the Conservation Planning Atlas, which is kind of what I've referred to as Everyman's GIS, where you can kind of download them directly from there into your own desktop ArcGIS, or you can just open it in a different kind of spatial viewer and look at that spatial data.
And depending on the scale that you're asking about, if you just go to the main page, ccastsoutheast.org, go to the blueprint page, there is a big orange button that says download the data. So if all you're looking at is the GIS layer for the blue map, you can absolutely easily download that into GIS. If you're looking for the underlying sub-regional input plans, each one of these from the viewer, if you scroll down, there should be a link to learn more access data. If you want to get to the data layer for that particular input. And then, as Louise said, for those indicators that are present in the viewer, for example, like these in the South Atlantic, you can directly go to the Conservation Planning Atlas to pull up that individual layer for marsh extent. And then if you click download, in this case, we have all of the South Atlantic blueprint data packaged up just in one zip file for you, but that will include the spatial layer for that particular indicator that you're interested in, as well as the other GIS layers associated with the blueprint. So there's kind of a lot of ways to get at that, but you should be able to pretty much get to the underlying GIS data at whatever level you're interested in from the Southeast viewer.
Mm-hmm. And I see we have 5 minutes left. I want to honor people's times, and I know we need a little bit of time to tell you about our next upcoming webinars. So I'm going to take one more question, and this is a hard, two, I'm going to cheat. So Pace asks, is the layer showing overall conservation priorities, which I'm guessing the Southeast Blueprint, that prioritization map, available as a web service, which I believe it is.
It is.
And also this last one, this is it, but we're going to keep Slido open if people want to continue to add things. Can you talk a little bit more about the release of the hubs and corridors in the viewer and when we'll be adding that?
Yeah, so the hubs and corridors part of the viewer, my guess is hubs and corridors are not going to be available until next year, unfortunately, because there were some challenges with visualizing that data due to the way that the blueprint is stitched together and some of the quirks with how that data is served up in the various subregions. Rua, please correct me if I'm underselling that. I think you would expect to see hubs and corridors in the viewer starting with the 2022 blueprint next year.
But it is available. We do have that on the Conservation Planning Atlas, the Everyman's GIS. You can look at that full Southeast hubs and connectors layer where it occurs in the Southeast Blueprint.
Yeah.
So you will be able to get to that and see that. And of course, we're always here to help.
Yeah, so here I am on the, am I muted or am I still, no, I'm good. Here I am on the Conservation Planning Atlas where you have this whole data gallery for Southeast Blueprint 2020. You can see there are a bunch of different layers here, one of which is hubs and connectors. So, and Pace, to your question, this would be a great place to grab a map service. This is from this Southeast Blueprint data gallery. I can, in fact, just go ahead and put a direct link to that in the chat.
Already given him in the chat. Amy's already.
You are the best. Thank you, Louise. It's so hard to multitask when you're sharing your screen. Yeah, so here you can grab the web services and also you can visualize that individual hubs and connectors data set. There's just some challenges to getting that into the simple viewer. So Rua, did you want to elaborate?
Yeah, thank you. I was just thumbs up. Yes.
Okay, cool. I can't see anybody when I'm sharing my screen. So with that, thank you so much for helping so much with this talk, Louise. I'm going to stop sharing that and start sharing my final slide just because we have a great webinar coming up next month and I want everybody to know about it. So next month we are going to be hearing from Matt Rubino and Steve Williams with the GAP program team. GAP is one of those funny acronyms that stands for Gap Analysis Program. So it's just kind of GAP. They are doing a second generation of their U.S. vertebrate species range and habitat maps, and they're going to be basing that off the 2016 land fire land cover data set. And so they'll be updating maps for more than 1,500 species that are modeled by GAP and doing some improvements in their data and modeling infrastructure that are going to make it a lot quicker to update in the future. So that I think will be great for their revision cycle and their update cycle. They're also incorporating some citizen science observations to inform known species ranges, which I think will be great as we're seeing habitat shifts, especially due to climate change, and ensuring that these range maps are keeping up with the changes and where those species are now. And this will also be an opportunity, I believe, to provide some feedback on what you'd like to see as an end user in their data delivery system for GAP. So this is going to be really exciting, kind of new GAP update, a lot of amazing improvements that they're making. So if you like to use GAP species data, this is a fabulous webinar for you. So April 15th, same time, same connection information as today. And then with that, I always like to end on this slide. If you're interested in getting a reminder email about this monthly web forum, please sign up on the South Atlantic website at southatlanticlcc.org, and that will get you signed up for that reminder email as well as a monthly newsletter. I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your Blueprint staff, whether that's me and Louise on the user support side or any of the folks here in Raleigh like Mallory and Amy and Rua. And of course, we encourage you to explore the Blueprint online, either the Southeast or the South Atlantic, since this was more of a Southeast talk today, and let us know how it's working for you. We live for your feedback, so. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And then I think that's it. Did we make it? 11 o'clock. If there are any parting questions, I don't mind hanging on for a couple of minutes so I can check the slide out again.
And again, if people, you guys are all free to leave.
You're dismissed, class.
If there's any other features you guys want to see, we're going to leave this Slido poll up. And so if you just happen to think about it later of like, oh, I wish I could see this, I hope they make sure that they include a big prominent search bar or something like that within their next version of the Blueprint, Southeast Blueprint Viewer. Just let us know.
Thanks so much for tuning in, guys.